Hi there, this is Jay from iWonder UK. Today I'm just going to do a little talk, make a video about what I think you need to do to prepare for a long distance walk. I'm out and about today, I'm trying to get my fitness back together again. I've been ill for 7, maybe 8 weeks going on now, and it's really knocked my fitness level out. Just wanted to take the opportunity to go through what I think you need to be thinking about on a long distance walk. This isn't going to be a complete list of equipment, but more of getting you in the frame of mind to think what works for you. I think a complete list for anybody just doesn't work. It's got to be down to an individual basis. Hopefully by the end of it, there'll be stuff to think about of what equipment you need to take, what you need to be doing before you go for the walk and during your walk, and an aid memoir at the end of thinking about how you're going to handle it all. For today, I'm going to leave training to one side, but I do think it's vital. Like I said, I'm back out now and I know I'm out of condition. But training, I'll try and make another video on and letting you know how I prepared for some of the long distance walks that I've done. There's a couple of sort of lines of thinking, trains of thought. Is one I do firmly believe in is 2 is 1 and 1 is none. And what I mean by that is, if you've got one item and it breaks, what are you going to do then? You can improvise on some things are essential you can't improvise on. Another school of thought is it's better to have and not need rather than need and not have. But the warning sign there is a limit, definitely on a long distance walk. Throughout this, I'm going to be talking about basically a balancing act, a game, if you like, of what would be great to take, what is essential, and the balance in between of what you can actually carry. I think there's a world of difference, if we're all honest with ourselves, between going out for a day and taking everything you need and all the luxuries for an ice camp. Frying pan, steak, a couple of beers would be lovely, but on a long distance walk, that ain't going to happen. And you need to be really, really honest with yourself of what you can actually take, and your overall enjoyment of the walk when you're actually going on. And carrying that amount of equipment can have a huge impact on your enjoyment of the walk. An example of that I would give is what I found out in myself. I think I've got a high pain tolerance and I like to be able to think I can push myself, but I get what I call fourth day fade. If I'm on a long distance walk through hike, I actually get to the fourth day, and it took me a long time to realise this, when first thing in the morning sometimes my body doesn't function straight away, and then later on in the day everything seems to be a bit of a struggle, steps or going uphill. The bag seems a little bit heavier, but it's only temporary. But that's for me personally. You just need to find out what your limits are. Equipment you need, in fact, you need to consider living in the UK as I do, and where I do most of my walking. The weather is, the wind's just got up then, as you can tell as I've come out the corner. It's unreliable, or not unreliable, changeable, shall we say. I would suggest your clothing needs to have that adaptability, if you like. When you leave, it could be sunny, but as we know, it can all turn cold or wet, and your equipment, especially your clothing, needs to reflect that. It's not just the weather that can change, it's the difference from your location. If you're leaving town and then you're walking particularly up on the hills or on the coast, for example, wind can make an enormous difference to the temperature rating you're going to range, should I say, that you're going to be experiencing over the few days that you're out. This year alone, I can think of 2 examples for me. I was walking the Norfolk coastal path with my brother, and on the 5th day, we'd had comfortable weather and the sun was out, which was quite nice, walking in shorts. On the 5th day, the temperature was 33 degrees. That's a huge difference in what it was, and something you need to be prepared for. It wasn't forecast, just a bit of a heat wave. The other end of the scale, when I was doing Two Moors Way, or what's called the Devon's Coast to Coast, in September, my sleeping bag was rated down to about 12 degrees. The temperature I checked long and hard before I left and during, it dropped down to 11 at most. On the 3rd night, the temperature dropped down to 2 degrees, meaning I had to take some, not drastic, but some different measures because my sleeping bag wasn't going to handle it. Fortunately enough, I have a jacket and other things that I always carry with me. It's just things you need to bear in mind as a reminder for yourself that it changes in this country. Maybe that's the beauty of it. Another things I want to touch on is food and your requirements for food, and I mean you as an individual. For example, when you're out and about on the southwest coastal path, which I did 2022 in March, April, I was carrying quite a big bag, about 20k to cover all circumstances, and I was burning 2,000 to 2,500 calories some day. That's what you need to find a way of getting that back into your system. I think this would be one of the points where I was talking about earlier on, like a balancing act. I'm sure we could all provide ingredients and stuff we need to make sure we eat every day, but the practicality of covering is a totally different story. For example, I have porridge I mix up. If anybody's interested, ask in the comments below and I'll put a description down of it, which does get me going. And I don't even eat porridge at home, but it's one of those things that I find works for me. But you start working that out as an example, an easy example perhaps, that comes out to just about 100 grams for one portion in the morning, and that's just for your breakfast. Times that by 5, you're looking at half a kilo or a pound in old money. You can see where I'm going with this. The maths start adding up and it starts becoming ridiculous. There's many ways of getting food and stuff nowadays with the dehydrated food packs. I personally don't use them because I find them too expensive for me, but I understand they are good and nutritional, got high in calories and get it in. But then again, I think they weigh about 300 to 350 grams. If you start multiplying that out, I'm not saying you can't do it or you shouldn't do it. It's just something you need to be working about. In your rucksack, when you're carrying all the equipment that you need to survive on a daily basis, your tent, your sleeping system, etc., you need to minimize the amount of food you've got and keep it essential. The obvious other thing you need to be considering alongside food is water. I personally like to finish the end of every day with 2 litres of water. The time you actually have porridge and a cup of tea in the morning, cup of tea and maybe a hot chocolate at night, you're looking at a litre and a half gone already. So for me, 2 litres at the end of the day works for me. Now, if you can fill up where you can in some shops, cafes, somebody might help you in the house, but I always carry a water filter with me as well and try and work out on my route where I'll be able to fill up water from. Just hooking back to food, for example, for a moment, if I can. Someone suggested to me when I walked the southwest coastal path, don't worry about it when I was asking questions on one of the forums. Just walk into the local town and pick up yourself a bacon sandwich or a cake. Well, that's ridiculous. The first 3 days I walked, I didn't walk past the shop that was open. So there's the tale. Times have changed for all of us now since COVID. Instead of the reliable, what I was used to being, a pub opened at 11 in the morning and closed at 11 at night, was open all afternoon, it's changed. And I've not found a consistent time opening for pubs now, for example. It's the same with shops. Opening hours and times close and change all the time. So don't rely on trying to get yourself food at certain places. I would recommend always having something in your bag, even if it's a snack, a chocolate bar, some nuts, something like that, just to keep you going if you don't get to the food place. And when you can, eat at food places. Makes the world a difference. Another consideration when I'm talking about shops or pubs or someplace to get a pasty or something to eat is, for me personally, definitely, but for you maybe not so, but I think I should mention it, is the cost of stuff when you're out. You're not going to the supermarket and doing a weekly shop. For example, a cake and a coffee could be over £5. Well, if you start combining that, your budget starts building up. Like I said, it's just a consideration, something you need to be thinking about. That's food. It's not 100% covered. It's just things that I think you need to be considering. Weight and availability en route and what works for you personally. How many calories do you need? Are you used to eating 3 meals a day? Next, a huge thing for me, and part of my plan in preparation, is working out where I think I can overnight camp, if that's what you're going to be doing. Now, personally, I enjoy it. I like the challenge of looking at maps, cross-referring them to Google Maps, seeing where I can go, see what's available, checking the contour lines, etc. But those things during the day can not add pressure to you, but you need to be aware of the daylight hours when you're actually walking along, thinking, how far have I got to go to this potential pitch? And when you get there, is it going to be a potential pitch, or could be a total fail and you need to come up with a backup plan? That's not trying to frighten anybody who's doing it for the first time, a long distance walking, but an ideal way to find your pitch is obviously go out and walk around that area On a long distance hike, that ain't going to be working, is it? You're going to be in places where you've never been before, but fortunately enough, you're only there for a night. Plan for where you're going to stay. If it doesn't work, have a bit of a backup plan, but know you can always rely on something. It normally works out, as long as you're not putting yourself in danger. Next thing I've got on my list is electronics, and by that I mean obviously my phone. I'm recording on my phone at the moment. You might use yours for OS maps, I know I do, and sometimes I use mine to actually gauge how far I've walked, etc. So you need to be thinking about your electronics and the reliability, but also signal or perhaps lack of it. While I'm talking about electronics as well, there's I mentioned battery banks. That's what I use. I use an Anker 20,000 megaamps or milliamps, whatever they are, the big ones, but I've got two of them. I tested mine before I left, and at home quite easily charged my phone for a week, literally 7 days. When I was walking Southwest Coastal Path, I lasted for 3 days. I started in March and it was fairly cold, and that does take a battering out of them, so be prepared for that as well. With your electronics, I know I'm going to say it again, it comes back to that balancing act of how much you want to use it for and how you're going to charge it. One, with a battery bank, but then after a certain amount of days, you're going to need to considering, where do I get this battery bank charged up, and how long does it actually take to charge? Mine, I think they take about 10 to 12 hours to fully charge when they're flat, so things to think of. Just a quick aside to that one, with my battery banks, I made a bodge together out of an old wetsuit sleeve, like a sock or a cover for my battery banks, and it did make a difference. I keep my battery banks inside the wetsuit sock, if you like, inside a Ziploc bag, and I try and not let them get cold by putting them on the floor. That can make a huge difference. I know this next fact can vary through the year, and depending on the month, etc., how long the actual days are, but the next thing I like to talk about is being prepared for those long nights in the tent. Particularly early or later on in the year, you can be in the tent for 12 hours or more. If you've set up and you don't get into bed till 6 o'clock, in the tent till 6 o'clock. I, for example, have my alarm set for 6:30. I'm normally awake before then, but I like to be up fairly early so I can get a cup of tea packed up and I'm ready, so I know I'm not going to be disturbing anybody. But 12 hours is a long time. Again, not trying to put anybody off, just saying you need to be aware of it and the effects, what effects it can have on you. I think if you're out for a long distance walk, you're obviously that type anyway. You like to be outside, perhaps you like to go camping, or both, a combination of both. It's just day after day, 1 day, 2 days, it's a world of difference from a long distance trailer, say 5, 10, 20 or more days. I think you need to be aware of what can affect you. What I mean by that is loneliness or your emotional state at the time. Your emotional state can obviously be affected by the amount of physical abuse you're giving your body. Not abuse, the pushing of it, I mean. It could be just lack of calories because you haven't eaten enough day. Frustration because you didn't get as many miles in as you thought you did, or you didn't quite get to where you thought you were going to do that day. It may just be missing loved ones or missing home, a bit of homesickness. That's nothing to be ashamed of. I think it happens to everybody. You're in a worldly different environment, and for a lot of days at a time, not 1 or 2, but lots of days at a time. It's something to be aware of that could, or perhaps I should say will happen. Like I said earlier, I didn't want to go extensively into training, but for me, that's what worked for me. Part of my training was walking for 60 days every morning, 5 miles, getting up at 6:30. It creates that discipline and self-motivation, and that's one of those things that I think helps you overcome when you know you hit a low period. Other things to consider are the weather and the hills and the path. They're not against you. You will have days when you're cursing the bloody hill, or it's raining just on you again, but it's not. And that's the frame of mind you need to keep coming back. When you feel those dips, bring yourself back out of it and say, it's not me personally. Another quick one that I could just think of is when you get stuff that you weren't expected, that you hadn't planned for example, detours. I've had it a couple of times. Second day, unfortunately for me, on the Southwest Coastal Path, there was a huge diversion inland. Took me 2.5, 3 hours to get back round to the path. you get that feeling of I'm walking extra miles for no reason. I've had it when I did the 2 Moors Way as well, but it's basically put it into context how you're going to handle the situation rather than what the situation actually is. I think one of the things you find when you're doing a long distance walking is the huge difference between just going for an overnighter or walking parts of a path in sections, etc. That's not to make out the big I am, it's just being aware of you get up in the morning, you've got to crack down your tent, pack away, pack your bags up. Then you're thinking about trying to where I'm going to get water through the day. The pressures can build up. Is my wild camping location going to be fine? Am I going to get there in time? All of these things can build up. And then at the end of the day, you need to be making your home up, making your food up, and then setting up your shelter for the night. It's not moaning about it. It's just a fact of life. All those things add to the extension of your day. Quick tips, or maybe what I would say is essential when you do your first long distance walk, or any long distance walk, to be honest with you. The first day, don't overdo the mileage. Take it easy. You're getting back into the stride of it again. Have a shakedown for you and your equipment, and it takes a lot of the pressure off. You might feel like you're being a bit slack, but just let yourself settle in on the first day. Top tip. For me personally, I love the freedom of long distance walking and wild camping. And it's almost a contradiction, but I think you need to be disciplined and organised, which sounds a bit boring, but it does make your life easier. I try to have everything in my bag in exactly the same place every time. If it doesn't work for you the first couple of days, shake it about a bit and change it. But for example, in the tent, I always know where my head torch is because I put it there every time. In my rucksack, I always know where my first aid kit is because I always put it there first time. Work out what works for you and just keep to that, and it will become, I think it's like muscle memory. It becomes easier. It's just easy because you know where it is and you're not searching around, scrubbing, trying to find something in the middle of the night. Nothing more frustrating. Following on from the tip or suggesting that you take it easy on the first day, which I do think is essential, is don't try and do too much because you feel like you're not walking enough. The first 10 days I did on the southwest coastal path, it's all right, just looking to see which way I should go. I tried to do too much, and I found after about 5 or 6 days, my sister phoned me and said, "Are you enjoying it?" And to be honest with you, it was a very close call of a balance between am I enjoying it and is it too hard? Not too hard, I can't think of the appropriate word, but what I'm trying to say is slow down. What are you doing out there? Are you trying to get somewhere? I don't want to be the cliche, it's about the journey, but it's about the journey. Go a little bit slower, go easier on yourself, take it in, and it gives you time to stop. When you bump into somebody, instead of going, "Oh yeah, how are you?" and off again, you can have those little 5-minute chats that made the world. Trust me, that meant the world to me. And those little bits where you just find something fascinating that you weren't expecting, the unexpected bits. I think you need to be realistic on mileage. It's not a marathon. Well, sorry, it is a marathon. It's not a sprint. You're not trying to get there in any certain space. Just you be you and do exactly what you want to do, and you'll get a lot more enjoyment out of it. There's lots of things that can affect it day by day. You're carrying stuff, fatigue, if you've had particularly bad weather, it really slows you down on the path. You never know what's going to actually hit you, catch you out by surprise. But give yourself that bit more time, and it takes the pressure off. You haven't trying to get somewhere all the time, and it's much more enjoyable. There's a lot more I wanted to say, and I just can't think of it at the moment, so I'll probably update this video another time. But essentially, when you've got your equipment list and you've decided on what you're going to take in for all the different weathers that you could or may happen to you, get that equipment and do a little shakedown. Go out for walks with it, check your waterproofs, put your tent up in your garden or a bit of grass somewhere if you can. But make sure you're happy with it. That confidence in your equipment is another worry out your head that you're not thinking about each day. I'm going to quote my old mate Lord Baden-Powell on this, but I think it's a very good tip to be prepared. It's not to be worrying about it, but think about what are you going to do if, for example, your kit gets soaked out during the day. If you can think of the examples before you go, when they turn up, they're not going to catch you by surprise so much. While we're on the topic of what if you like, another suggestion that I would recommend is make sure, I was on a budget when I walked, I always am, but make sure you've got enough money i.e. a bank card or cash, or both preferably. Times have changed, but some shops still just take cash. Some of the ferries did on the Southwest Coastal Path, and some of them just take cards, to make sure you got both. And have a little emergency backup, so you know that if you needed to catch a bus or a taxi, or even perhaps to the stage of having an overnight in a bed and breakfast, you've got the cash / money bank card to cover for that. That's another little weight off your mind. Still on the what if factor, please make your own first aid kit up. Get together what works for you. If you think about what could happen to you on the thing, a lot of the time it's headaches, muscle pains, scratches, insect bites, things like that. But get the appropriate first aid that works for you. Any medication you need, obviously essential. Make your own first aid kit up. Have a think about it before it happens. Be prepared, but then you don't need to be carrying hospital type equipment. It's first aid in case you get into trouble. You're just trying to get yourself out of that situation and to civilization or the next town. Again, another thing that just occurred to me then was thinking about looking after yourself is your feet. Look after your feet, they look after yourself. Or they'll look after you, I think is what they say. Sorry, I messed that one up, didn't I? It's so easy to get into the situation where you're trying to get somewhere, but please, I recommend, if you can, and obviously depending on the weather, stop, take 5 minutes, take your boots off, take your socks off, and let your feet air out. You'll be surprised at the difference it makes. I'm just going to try and wrap this video up now. Like I say, I've done several long distance walks: Southwest Coastal Path, 2 Miles Way, Norfolk Coastal Path, Peddars Way. I'm no expert, but I've been out there and enjoyed several walks. If you want to have a look, please look in the description below. If you could, that'd be brilliant. Please subscribe to my channel. That's in the bottom right, I think, or it'll be in the description below. But most of all, get out there and enjoy yourself. Number 1, be kind to yourself. This is Jay from I Wander UK. I'm out of here.